In the summer of 1961, the Italian Grand Prix in Monza was supposed to be a big celebration for the passionate Italian fans known as tifosi. Ferrari was enjoying a remarkable season and seemed on the verge of clinching the World Drivers' Championship. However, what was supposed to be a happy day turned into a tragic one for the Italian fans and the world of F1 at large. During the 1961 season, Ferrari was doing a great job adapting to the new rules about how big the car engines could be. They had a special V6 engine called Dino, and their car, the 156 Sharknose, was the best. The championship was coming down to the wire, and Wolfgang von Trips had 33 points, while his teammate Phil Hill had 29 points. The stage was set for a thrilling showdown at Monza, where Hill had clinched victory the year before. However, Monza hadn't been kind to von Trips in the past. On the same circuit, 5 years prior, disaster struck as his steering failed, hurtling him into the woods at a harrowing speed of 190 km per hour. 2 years later, on the very first lap of the race, he found himself involved in a tumultuous collision with Harry Schell's BRM. These two drivers were very different. Von Trips, a German count, was super talented but had a reputation for being a bit reckless when he was younger, earning him the nickname Von Crash. Later, people started calling him Taffy in a more affectionate way. Phil Hill, on the other hand, was more technical and precise. He had just won his second Le Mans 24 Hours race earlier that year, which was a big deal. In the battle for the Constructors' Championship that season, only one team stood a chance against the mighty Ferrari, and they were even considered a bit of a long shot. Lotus, the underdog in this fierce competition, saw a glimmer of hope thanks to Stirling Moss's remarkable victories in his privately run Lotus at two iconic tracks, Monaco and the Nürburgring. These victories gave them a remote possibility of overtaking Ferrari in total points. Before the official practice sessions began on a Friday afternoon, there was a unique ritual on the famous Monza track. Drivers who had never raced at Monza before had a special session to acquaint themselves with the banked circuit. It involved solo laps at normal speeds, allowing them to get a feel for the steeply banked corners formation. While this might sound mundane to some, it was a wise precaution, especially for those new to such a challenging track. The grid was set for the race with a massive entry of 37 vehicles, but only 32 of them made the cut. Qualification was determined by a time cutoff, which was somewhat less stringent than the modern 107% rule. In this case, drivers failing to come within 15% of the second fastest time were eliminated. Despite Phil Hill's best efforts, it was Wolfgang von Trips who secured the pole position for Ferrari. Starting on the second spot was von Trips' new Ferrari teammate, the young and talented Ricardo Rodriguez. What made his achievement even more impressive was that he used an older 60-degree V6 engine, in contrast to the 120-degree unit his teammates had. Richie Ginter and Phil Hill were positioned third and fourth on the grid. Hill noticed a decrease in engine power and promptly had his engineers replace the damaged valve spring. He took it upon himself to oversee the repair work, ensuring it met his high standards before heading back onto the track. Among the non-Ferrari vehicles on the grid, Graham Hill's BRM had the most promising starting position. During practice, he completed his first lap in the P578, the very car that would carry him to victory in the World Championship the following season. As race day approached, he returned to his familiar P57, ready to face the challenge of Monza. Stirling Moss made a bold move by using a new V8 engine from Climax for the qualifying round. However, he ran into trouble with the engine's cooling system. So, the night before the race, he switched to Innes Island's Lotus, which had a 4-cylinder engine. Moss used some parts from his original car, creating a mix of his and Island's vehicles. This made his car look different, with a unique paint job that combined Lotus green and Rob Walker's blue. The stage was now set for a thrilling race at Monza. Race day. On this special Sunday morning, things kicked off with two Gran Turismo races that lasted a total of 6 hours at the famous Monza circuit. As the sun blazed down, the excitement for the upcoming Grand Prix was building. A huge crowd had gathered and all sorts of vehicles, from cars and scooters to motorcycles and bicycles, were arriving at the Autodromo. It was a spectacle that hadn't graced Monza's grounds in quite a while. The grid for the Grand Prix boasted an impressive 32 starters, but what made it stand out was the unique way they were arranged. Lined up in pairs with staggered rows, this starting grid was perhaps the longest ever seen in a Grand Prix. Notably, the car Stirling Moss was driving garnered attention with its unconventional appearance, featuring a blue top, dark grey bottom and yellow wheels. The air was charged with excitement as the moment of truth neared. As the 1-minute signal approached, engines across the grid roared to life, the noise of revving engines filling the air. When the flag dropped, the Ferraris, geared with high axle ratios, seemed to hesitate for a moment before surging forward. It was a thrilling sight as Graham Hill's dark green BRM car confidently jostled amidst the sea of red Ferraris, immediately taking the lead. The entire field of 32 racers made a smooth start, forming a continuous stream as they navigated the Curva Grande and negotiated the Lesmo turns. As they sped down the back straight, the grandstands offered a clear view of Clark's Lotus amidst the red Ferraris. Ginter and Clark engaged in a side-by-side battle as they raced up the main straight towards the north banking. Following closely were Phil Hill, Rodriguez, Von Trips, Brabham and Baghetti, with the remaining drivers forming a tightly packed convoy in hot pursuit. The intensity of the competition was such that a large tarpaulin could have easily covered all 7 cars, highlighting how tightly packed they were. Behind them, another group of drivers, including Bonnier, Gurney, Moss and Surtees. The leader maintained their close formation as they approached the Parabolica bend, but just before they were supposed to start braking, a tragic moment unfolded. Clark and Von Trips collided, creating a tense situation on the track. At that moment, Hill, Ginter and Rodriguez were in front of them, while Baghetti and Brabham found themselves side by side, luckily avoiding the accident. As a result of the collision, Von Trips was thrown out of his Ferrari, and the car flipped multiple times and crashed into the protective fence, bouncing back onto the track as a wreck in the middle of the circuit. The crash also made Clark's Lotus spin, but it mostly stayed on the track and eventually stopped on the grassy side. Amazingly, Clark himself was shaken but not hurt, despite the dramatic turn of events, but that wasn't the case for Von Trips. After a hard landing, Von Trips was rushed to the hospital, but fate dealt a cruel hand and he passed away before medical help could reach him. The aftermath of the accident was devastating. Von Trips' Ferrari careened into a group of spectators, instantly killing 11 people and injuring many who were leaning on the barrier. Tragically, 3 more people succumbed to their injuries in the days that followed. The race kept going without any red flags, and only those close by knew what had happened. The organisers kept the incident undisclosed. Luckily, despite the chaotic scene, no other cars became entangled in the crash. As the race continued, Hill and Ginter briefly swapped positions in the lead, with Hill ultimately pulling ahead by a 20-second margin. The Ferraris, one by one, succumbed to technical issues, first Baghetti, then Rodriguez, and finally Ginter on lap 24. When the race finished, Phil Hill was the only Ferrari still racing. Brabham, who had witnessed the tragic accident, had to retire after 8 laps due to an overheating issue with his new V8 Climax engine. He offered insights into the accident, dispelling any notions of reckless driving, saying, "I don't think either Jimmy Clark or Taffy Von Trips were cutting each other up, as was suggested at the time. Jimmy was always a driver you could race really aggressively against and be quite certain that he wasn't going to do something dumb." As Phil Hill crossed the finish line, 2 hours and 3 minutes after the race began, he might have sensed something was amiss. The silent response from his team and the sad expression on the faces of the engineers in the paddock hinted at the grim reality. Despite his victory, Hill concealed his emotions during the prize ceremony. He was crowned world champion, but there would be no celebrations, only a profound sense of loss and tragedy. So, after hearing all this, what are your reflections on this tragic race? Share your thoughts in the comment section down below.